Well, thank you. It's really scary to be called a special guest, let me tell you. I just feel like I'm here because I want to tell you something. So thank you. I've been asked to make a very few comments about being a volunteer at Keystone Food Shelf. My experiences have been phenomenal, and I can go on all evening, but I promise to keep this really short. But Jen, by the way, expanded what I was going to say. So I first got connected with Keystone during the pandemic in 2020. At the start of the pandemic, a local radio station said that there was a shortage of volunteers. And so I got online and I looked around and it was like, oh, Keystone popped up. You know, I'd never heard of Keystone before. So Keystone popped up and it was close to me, close to my neighborhood. I said, I can do that. So I looked at it and it was like, I can't fix bikes, you know. And there was no tutoring for kids, so giving out food was probably in my wheelhouse, so I'll do that. So for the first 2 years as a volunteer at the food shelf, we pre-packaged foods. We put canned bags and canned foods in bags, and we added produce and deli for the customers, and then we handed them out to the customers as they walked up to the door, and one at a time, 6 feet apart, and handed them out. And it went through the line. Well, that was 2 years in advance, 2 years fast forward to today. Late last year, Keystone opened to shoppers, and where customers could walk in and select their own food. Now, my experience as a volunteer changed dramatically. It was a whole new world. The first major change I noticed is that we went from 12 to 15 people in the mornings to 35 people in 2.5 hours. So the change in service was dramatic. And we moved on to really meeting people. Now with shoppers in the market selecting their grocery items, it was a new experience for me. I got to be more face-to-face with our customers. I got to talk with them. Not only was I able to meet with them, but I was able to assist them in selecting their foods, and I was able to talk with them and hear their stories. Now, if I don't cry, I'm a success, but if I start crying, you'll have to put up with me. Each visitor's story is unique. I could be here all evening telling you stories about individuals I've met and experiences I've had in Keystone. Each day at the food shelf is a new story, and I leave with a new feeling of gratitude for the work that Keystone is able to provide to our community. Tonight, I'm going to share you just 2 stories from my recent experiences. Last week, there was a very tired mom who walked around the corner, and I asked her what she would like in frozen foods. And of course, I had to excuse myself because the food shelf, the freezer door was broken. Jeff will attest to that. And I said, you know, I'm going to have to pick out your food for you. So what we have on hand are hot dogs, frozen corn, pork chops, and we had a little bit left of ground turkey, but you'll have to make your choice. She looked at me with these huge tears in her eyes, and she said, thank you. Thank you. I'll take the hot dogs. And she went on to tell me that she couldn't pay the rent and that she was looking for a place to live, and that she and her 3 sons were now mobile. In other words, they were on the street. Her little 6-year-old was standing next to her and looked up at her and saw the tears coming down, and then, see, this is where I fall apart. Then he looked at me and he said, it's okay, I eat at school, and I collect cans for rent. I was like, holy cow. There is no way I can know the full experience that that family is going through. But I could see the relief in the mother's eyes that she had a package of hot dogs to take with her, along with her canned foods. And she was so grateful. She gave me this great big hug. When do you go to work and get a hug? You know, it's really wonderful. Another experience I had was John. He was a young man who visited the food shelf occasionally, and he was off and on. He loved to discuss politics and technology, and then he'd talk about the books that he read, and we discussed some things that we shared in common with reading. And I didn't see him for a long time, until recently. He walked in, and this time he was a little bit more worn and disheveled than his previous experiences. I handed him his milk and cheese and eggs from the cooler. When I gave them to him, he said, immediately, he gave them to another customer. And he said, I don't have a place to put these. Give them to somebody else who can use them. And then John stopped and explained that he had just been released from the hospital, and he had no place to go. All he wanted was someone to tell him that he would be okay, that they cared about him. His situation was extremely complicated. He didn't want to go home because his parents had done all that they could for him. He didn't want to be a burden to them anymore. Jeff, the Keystone manager from the food shelf, immediately spotted the young man's desperation and sorrow. And he softly came up and commonly started talking with him and referred him to the social worker. Last week, John happened to come into the food shelf the same time I was working. And he looked at me and he said, thank you. Keystone saved my life. Well, he took his milk and cheese and he walked out. And I'll never know the full impact of the help that John got from Keystone and from Jeff and the social worker. But I will never forget the powerful statement he said as he walked out of Keystone. Every day, there are so many stories and there are so many families. Right now, as Keystone plans for this great new community food center, I know that there'll be their expertise and vision to expand support for people in our community. This center will provide so much help to so many. But more than just the people that come in the shelf, it's the people who work there. It's the volunteers. It's you. It's all of us who really make a difference. It's hard to truly explain, but like John said, Keystone has been a gift to all of us. Truly, most days I don't know who the givers are or who the receivers are. I think we are all on the same team, standing in line, waiting, working to make each day a little bit better than yesterday. Thank you, and thank you for joining our team to make our community better. Thank you to you.